Hola estudiantes, hoy vamos a estudiar el alfabeto. Tenemos una orden de operación que puedes ver en inglés. You can see the order in English here to follow along. Primero, vamos a discutir por qué es importante el alfabeto o por qué existe el alfabeto. Después vamos a ver el alfabeto y sus sonidos. Después de eso, los cambios de escribir y finalmente un comentario rápido en las combinaciones de vocales. Bueno, vamos a empezar. Pues vale, ¿por qué tenemos un alfabeto? Why have an alphabet in the first place? First, it breaks down the sounds of a language. And in Spanish, it is so much easier because, like we're going to discuss later on, things tend to stay the same. In English, it is very complex and there's a lot of combinations that sound different a lot, but in Spanish, it's going to remain very similar. El segundo punto aquí. It helps us develop and create sounds for a language. It helps us understand how to pronounce what we are reading. Again, I'm going to circle back here. English is a bit different. Obviously, when you read, it's going to sound a little bit different. Of course, everyone brings up the cough and through and tough. They have the O-U-G-H, but they all sound different. In Spanish, again, it's more consistent. Número 3, it helps us spell, read, write, and speak a language. Just like I said, the creation of the sounds for the language helps us to spell, read, write, and speak the language as well. Ahora vamos a hacer una actividad. Aquí son las instrucciones. If you're following along with a booklet, the letters will already be written out for you. All you need to do is listen and write. If you do not have that, that's all right. I suggest before you even start or continue with the video that you go ahead and write out the letters or write them down as you go so that you can listen for the sounds. But I want you to listen to each letter as it comes up on the screen and listen to how I say the letter. Then I want you to write down how you think it sounds. However you hear that sound, whatever that spelling looks like for you, write that down next to the letter. And then I want you to repeat the sound. If you want to go back and listen again, you can do that. That's the beauty of a video. You can pause, you can rewind as many times as you need. But go ahead and repeat the sound. So you're practicing that sound, and you can also work on reading what you just wrote because in the future, you don't want to look at your notes and think, oh my goodness, I have no idea what I was thinking there. And like I said, pause as needed. You're going to likely need to pause because you're going to have to write and then repeat. I strongly suggest pausing or, like I said, rewind. Say it with me as you hear the sound. Vale, vamos a empezar. La letra A. La letra B. La letra C. A side note here to say is that in Spain, people often use the thetheo or lisp, making this letter, making it the. Instead of say, it's the. This is something I do often when I am speaking in full sentences. I will use the thetheo instead of a ceseo from more Latin American Spanish. Latin American countries tend towards an S sound with both this letter and the letter Z. So keep that in mind by the time we get to letter Z. D, E, F, G, H. Side note here, this letter is silent. When you see the letter H on H, la letra H, in a word, you are not going to pronounce it is entirely silent. In some dialects, you won't even see this when it is written out. They just take the H out entirely. I, J, K. This is not a common letter in Spanish. Koala is one word that has a K in it, la letra K, but it is not common. It is, however, an official letter in the alphabet for consistency. L, ella. Another side note here, as of 2022, it's officially not a letter. I like to include this because it has a different sound than what you would normally read it as if you were speaking or reading aloud with an English accent. He was using L sound, but it's different from an LA. It's an AY. It's like a Y. So it's really important to note that sound change, even though it's not officially a letter in the alphabet. M, N, Nye. Again, not officially in the alphabet, but I wanted to include it because it has that additional ye on the end. O, Te, Ku, Ere, R, another letter that has been taken out of the official alphabet. S, T, U, B, W, again, much like la letra K, not often used. X, Y, sounds like E. Zeta or zeta, remember that's the theo, much like with la letra C or C. Vale, ahora vamos a hablar de algunos cambios en cuando estás escribiendo. There are not many Spanish spelling changes, so I wanted to go ahead and just talk about them now because you will see them, and it starts to kind of add to how we change things and how you say some certain combinations of letters. So there are three common ones. We're only going to focus on the two most common ones and the ones that you will see most often. These changes are made to make sounds consistent. Again, we circle back to how I said in Latin English, sounds and spelling are not consistent. In Spanish, they are. They're going to remain very consistent, and we have these spelling changes purely to keep that consistency, and it really helps to connect the ideas. Vale, las vocales or the vowels always make the same sound. This is muy importante, very important, because every time you see a vocal, a vowel, it's going to make the same sound every single time. An A always sounds like ah. No matter its position, it's an ah. A, E, O, and U, all right? Those vocales, the vowels, are going to sound the same, with the exception of one of them, and that's la letra U. La letra U, this final one at the bottom with the star, la letra U. A, E, and O, always the same, no matter their combination. They're going to have that sound as its base. We're going to talk a little bit more in a moment about some of those combinations and how you might think that they have changed, but they haven't. So let's talk about la letra U. Why do I have a star next to it? Why do I say that it is a little bit different? Well, it is the main character when we talk about spelling changes. So, dos sonidos, la letra G y la letra C or C. All right, these two letters can make two different sounds. We call them the soft and the hard sounds, or the dura y suave in Espanol. All right, this is you hear this in English all the time. La letra G can sound either a hard sound, a dura, sonido duro, G, or H. The same with the C. sa or th, and ka. All right, so you have those two sounds with these two words, or these two letters. So why do we have these spelling changes? Well, sometimes you have to have these letters, the a, e, I, o, u, those vocales, next to letters. When an A and a G are next to each other, an A and a G, they're next to each other, that G will always make a hard G sound. Every time you see a G next to an A, it's going to make the hard G sound. Let's say you're conjugating a verb and you need to have that h sound, or you want to create that h sound, or you hear that h and you want to write it out. How are you going to write the h? Well, instead of putting a G next to an A, which makes the sound g, we're going to write a J next to an A. So as you can see right here, we have ha, ga. If I read straight down, and I'm going to put a little star next to each letter that has the dura sound. I'm going to put a little star next to it. Ga, he, he, go, gu. Those are terrible stars. I'm so sorry, but they're marks anyway. So again, we have the hard G sound next to a, o, and u. Ga, go, and gu. Our soft sounds are with e and I, or a and e. I want to make these consistent for you, the letras en español. All right, so we have the hard sounds with a, o, and u, and the soft sounds with a and e. So if I read them down through again, ga, he, go, and gu. So again, if I want to change this to a ha from a ga, I put a J instead of a G, ha. I do the exact same thing for go and gu. If I want ho, I put a J instead of an O, or a J instead of a G. If I want hu, I put a J instead of a G. So now we have, if I want to say all of these letters with a soft sound, I have ha with the J. Let's get my little pointer back. Ha, he, ho, hu. Ha, he, ho, hu. If I want to make the g, the hard sound from these soft sounds, so instead of he, I have ge, instead of he, I have gi. This is where that u comes in handy, that la letra u. It is going to be silent in this case. If a u, la letra u, shows up between la letra G and la letra E, it is silent, but it makes the g sound, ge. It's the same with la letra E. I want to change it from he to gi. I put a u in between the G and the E. The u is silent, gi. So now if I want to read through and make all of these the hard sound, I have ga, ge, gi, go, gu. All right. Before we move on, I want to stop there. Make sure that if you're following along in the notebook, these things have little instructions for you, side comments for you to follow along. If not, you can always rewind, watch again. Hopefully, that will make more sense if it doesn't already. All right, let's go ahead and clear the screen, and we're going to talk about that second. So it's the exact same theory. You're going to keep the same theory as we have for la letra G, but with the letra C. So we have the same system. Remember, ga, he, he, go, gu, hard, soft, soft, hard, hard. We're going to do the exact same thing over here. Ha, se, si, ko, ku, or ka, se, si, ko, ku. Hard, dura, suave, suave, dura, dura. Hard, soft, soft, hard, hard. All right. So again, remember how we discussed previously that la letra Z and la letra C, they have that similar ceseo because they're very similar. Unlike with the S is different. We're going to change the ka, the C, la letra C, to a letra zeta to make the soft sound. Ka, sa, or ka, sa. All right? It's going from dura to suave. Dura, suave. Casa. Se, si. Again, I want to take it from dura, co, to suave, so. I'm just changing the C to a Z. Co, so. Ku, su. Ku, su. Sa, se, si, so, su. Ka. And I want to make it the hard sound. I'm going to change the C to a Q. And once again, we're adding la letra U in between the A and the Q, the E and the Q. Q, U, A. It makes the sound K. All right, this is a very important thing to note because I have heard it from so many students. So many students say que. When they read to me, they say que. That U is always going to be silent when it is between a Q and an E, a Q and an I, a G and an E, or a G and an I, unless it has two dots above it, like pinguino. Those two little dots are special, but they're very rare too. I would say that. Pinguino is one of the very few words that has the two dots over the U. If it doesn't have that, it's silent just between that Q and E, Q, I, G, E, G, I. That's something to take note of. All right. So again, I changed the C to a Q and add a U in between to make these hard sounds instead of soft sounds. So now we have ka, ke, ki, ko, ku. All right. Hopefully that all makes sense. It's a lot of information, I know, but vamos a mover al próximo idea. All right, so a quick thought on just combining sounds. Like I just said, las vocales, they're always going to sound the same. A, E, I, O, and U, with exception if it's between the G and the E, the Q and the E, the G and the I, or the Q and the I. Those are the only times, and at those points it's going to be silent. There's no sound at all. All right, so let's start with this one. I'm going to sound it out slowly. Remember, those vocales, las vocales, they're going to sound the same. The rest of the letters in the alphabet are really quite similar to English. The only thing I would note here is an ere. It kind of sounds like a D, like a really soft D. So we have e, p, e, s, a, ere. Empezar. Empezar. So if you break it down again, we have the e, the pe, the sa, r. It's a really soft D. Empezar. It's kind of like a D. Anyway. All right, go ahead and practice saying these words as I go through them. Pause, practice. All right, so we have our first combination of kind of the vocal sounds. We didn't really talk about Y, la letra Y, but it does sound like an E. All right, la letra Y, not an English E. So we have H is, again, la letra H is silent. We're not going to say it, pretend it's not even there. La letra A, I, la letra Y, but it sounds like E. Ay, ay, ay. This word is I. Here we have a lot of good combinations here. So we have a, and u, e. I, aeropuerto, pue, aeropuerto. So we're still, like I said, if we take them apart and we sound that one by one, it's going to sound the same. But when you smush it all together, it makes a very coherent sound that you would think is changed, that the I and A are not sound like A, but I. But it's still that same sound, I and huerto, aeropuerto. All right, so let's take a special look at the I, Y, A, and those things like I just said. With E. So let's sound it out. I. All right, same with la Y here. It sounds exactly like an E. So I. The A and A, just like we did in aeropuerto. I. All right, when you're listening to words, these all, if you're noticing here, they all sound very, very similar. If you are listening to a word and you're trying to figure out how to spell it based on what it is, this is going to take just some knowledge of how things look. All right. It would look a little bit weird to put aeropuerto. We don't want aeropuerto, we want aeropuerto. I know it sounds so similar. Um, but that's going to come from just that practice of knowing how things are spelled in Spanish is going to be very consistent overall. Um, but these are just some that you're going to see in different areas, and they are very similar. There are lots of other sound combinations. We call diphthongos the diphthongs. There are many, many, many. For example, if you have an a and an u, au, um, or an u and an a, wa, guardio. All those things, when you have those sounds together, they're called diphthongos, diphthongs, and there are many. We're not going to talk about them all right now. Maybe a future video, since it's getting quite long. So, a few takeaways to go with you. Vowels always maintain their sounds, except U, which may be silent when, drum roll, next to a G and an E, or between G and E, between Q and E, between Q and I, or G and I. There are some spelling changes that occur in order to maintain the hard and soft G and the hard and soft C. And we can spell a word based on how it sounds, with the exception of the CZS, VB. Those are very similar sounds, and so they're oftentimes they end up being the sounds that are most often misspelled when writing. But overall, it's much easier than English, and I hope you have enjoyed and learned a lot about the alphabet and the sounds. This really helps you. My greatest suggestion, if you want to practice your pronunciation and get really good pronunciation, is to find a book in Spanish, a children's book, an adult book. You can find them really cheap at used bookstores, and just read aloud. Read aloud, making sure you pronounce every one of those letters. And of course, if you have any questions, please leave them below and I'd be happy to answer them. Adios.